right, let's get started. We have a good amount of content to go over today. So we'll jump in. Today we're talking about driving client happiness with Gatsby. This webinar is really for agencies, and we're going to talk a lot about the Jamstack world and how Gatsby fits in there, and then how those two things can really complement agencies as they go to build out websites for their clients, and what that means today for them. So just a little bit of housekeeping. We are recording this webinar. We will send an email out in the next 48 hours with the recording. So if you have to hop off, don't worry, you're still going to get the content. Though we will be answering Q&A. So if you stick around, please ask questions in the questions tab. There's both the questions and the chat. The questions are just a little bit easier to wrangle in there. So please put them there. And then also we have a poll today. So we will be sharing a poll and asking you a bit of information there. All right, so what we're covering today. Today, my name is Dan Giordano. I run product marketing here at Gatsby, and I have with me senior software engineer, Grayson Hicks, who has a ton of agency experience in his background. So he will be our resident expert today. But we're going to be talking about balancing clients' needs and kind of the challenge of agency-client dichotomy, how the Jamstack helps it, and how Gatsby helps and fits in there. And then we'll talk a little bit about how both of those and Gatsby Cloud are really garnered and have an advantage for agencies, and some of the smaller features that we're adding there. So we'll get to it. Actually, we'll skip this because I have another Gatsby slide. But let's talk quickly about the challenges and the dichotomy of agency life. Grayson and I were talking about this yesterday, and we came up with something agency experience versus client experience. And that's what we're going to talk about today, kind of serving those two needs. As an agency, you have your own needs and you think about tools, you think about solutions, maybe very intrinsically. But then we also have client needs on the other side, where they look at a website and what it helps them achieve, maybe differently. And sometimes those are diametrically opposed, sometimes they're not, and they go together. And obviously Gatsby and Jamstack, I think, are heading in that direction where both are starting to serve each other. But this is what we'll be talking about today. So Grayson, first up, we have speed. And on the agency side, we kind of define speed as the speed of which development happens, right? As a developer building a website, your care is about how quickly can you get websites out, how quickly can you build new things. Then on the client side, website performance really is where we look at speed, right? So those are two sides of the coin. They're both, when we talk about being fast, being quick, one is on the development side, the other is an end user, is more on the client side, right? They care about, does the website work quick? Does it feel responsive when I go to touch buttons? But these two things, again, they work together on both the agency side and the client side. Security is our second bullet here. And again, for the agency side, security, I'm sure, Grayson, you're familiar with this, is like frameworks come and go. And many technologies are very hot for a quick amount of time. An agency will spend time to flip over their websites for that. And then slowly over time, that website technology will no longer be in vogue. There won't be as much support for it. And we see that happen. Now, on the client side, security, really, they're worrying about their data. They mean, is their data safe? Is this a secure technology to build with? And am I going to get hacked? And then lastly here, quickly, is scalability. So on the agency side, scalability is really looking at, is this technology going to scale across multiple projects? Do I have to choose it for some? Do I have to choose other technology for other projects? Is it going to fall down when my client has a lot of projects underneath and maybe concerns with traffic? Now, on the client side, they really care about traffic and the growth of the technology itself, right? Can I have multiple websites? Can I continue to grow and throw marketing dollars and not have a worry that my website is going to fall down? Right, and then you have to balance those three things across all the clients. So Grayson, we'll go through some of these today. Content management, payment management, form management. Those are all things that, like, again, the agency is going to have to handle on their side. And then SEO, faster loading pages, this is all on the performance side, and that speed. And then world-class design, and I put here every single fancy feature and piece of functionality that like a competitor might have. Anytime someone can see something and throw that back, they're going to, and just ask for it and say, hey, can I get that roped in? Are these some of the things that you were seeing in your past time? And what kind of was the biggest one that you felt like your previous like solutions weren't solving?
Is that for me, Dan?
Yeah, Grayson.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's hard to put one on top of the other because speed without security is nothing. And same with scalability. I would say that speed is one of the probably more common things. Security is kind of like it's almost an expectation that you have some baseline security with whatever technology you're building with. But speed can be a driver of the business, and right, every website is at the end of the day a business driver, right? It's either e-commerce or it's trying to get an appointment with someone or whatever the conversion is on your site. Speed is super important for converting that person from a user to a customer. So I would say probably speed is the most common request, where security I see more as a requirement, and then scalability sometimes feels more like a nice to have, or like how are we going to scale. But speed is like we want to be as fast as possible.
Makes sense. And I think from like a content management perspective, many agencies in the past, they've had to basically pick something to specialize in, right? Like they're either a WordPress shop or a Drupal shop, or even like custom development, right? Like kind of those flavors of types of agencies have popped up. And I think that was because of technological limitations, right? You just couldn't be an expert in everything. There was too much coupled between those technologies. So WordPress meant not only their schema, the way they do things at the CMS level, but then that also means PHP on the code side and like FTPing. So like comes kind of with baggage in the past. Whereas we think Jamstack is the future and solves a lot of that. So the Jamstack's a modern architecture pattern for building better websites. It's not particularly like a vendor or a specific technology. It's a pattern. It's more of a cloud native pattern. I think we've also seen kind of like the mock come out. They're all very similar, but they're a mashup of JavaScript, APIs, and markup that are all used in combination to build kind of these decoupled websites where there's not strong monolithic vertical integration, but you get best of breed with services, which we'll see. You get best of breed with content management systems while still getting a lot of the advantages of the content or the front end framework of choice. It's secure, performant, and most important, I think, it's flexible. Flexibility, I think, is key when talking about agencies and clients. Again, you can work yourself in a box as an agency of what you're able to sell to the end client. So clients will come, they will choose out of what you can offer. And that's sometimes good, but sometimes you want to be a little bit more flexible and be able to offer those things. Maybe you're growing with an enterprise client and they just have needs that are outgrowing your agency, what you supply. They're going to move on to something that is a little bit more fitting for them. But you'll see with Jamstack, you can really expand those needs. You're no longer going to get questions like, hey, can I have this feature? And your immediate thought is there a plugin for that? Has someone done that before, right? You're going to be able to know that if there's an API and a service out there, you're going to be able to work it into the fold pretty quickly. So the kind of the four big advantages here of the Jamstack and using modular composable web design: security, scalability, affordability, and productivity. So improved security, static sites, they're decoupled from the server. they're not going to have this large vector of attack surface that many other front end and monolithic architectures have. Like bringing up WordPress, not only like, let's say aside their plugin architecture, everything was super secure and updating things worked flawlessly. You still do have the potential of really having something nasty happen because you're having constant connection with an open database. With a static site, you're not going to have that same thing. There's just going to not be the same openness to the system, and there's no connection to the live database. Scale with ease. Same thing here with kind of vertical and horizontal scaling. Jamstack sites are going to scale much better because they're on the edge. So because they're on the edge, there's no need to kind of boost, let's say, server bandwidth to go with a huge package of this much bandwidth, this much server space. It's kind of all relegated to no ops, and you're just putting your website on the edge. It's going to scale horizontally across the globe very, very easily. Did you ever have problems with this in the past, Grayson, where maybe something on like the server side wasn't going to scale? You get that Reddit hug of death with an agency or with a client, and all of a sudden they're panicked.
Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely not going to name names, but it's definitely a different feeling when you have, your server resources are like constantly required, right? Where like, if there's a problem with your server resources, your site goes down. With the Jamstack, worst case, if there's a problem with your server resources, your site might not build. And then you need to figure out why, maybe why your build isn't working, but your live site, your customer experience is not impacted.
Not impacted by that.
So that's a big difference, especially if you're ever on like pager duty at an agency and there's a, it's Saturday night and then you get an alert that's like so-and-so site is down. I can't even think of a time that's happened with Jamstack. Maybe with like something, but it was like maybe their hosting expired or something, but it's not going to be related to the actual Jamstack itself. So that is a lot of peace of mind.
Definitely. And actually that small package also comes with lower costs. Hosting on the edge, having your site statically render. It's just a much smaller footprint on the server. Your server is not constantly actively waiting for a page to be loaded again. It's just sitting there on the edge. If no updates are made, you're just going to get very minimal costs on an edge network. You can bring your website down literally 80%, 90%, just by moving that same content to a Jamstack framework and putting it on a content delivery network. And then finally, boost dev productivity. Grayson, I'll let you take this one, but I know this is major coming from like the last 20 years of web development and either having to pick this really simple, like, I guess, CMS that locked you in, that was monolithic, or this very custom app development. And now we kind of have this middle ground with Jamstack.
Yeah. So I thought it was really interesting that Dan, when we were reviewing this, I was talking about DX, and he came up with the term AX, and it kind of points to the fact that there's a lot more stakeholders at an agency than just the devs. So, but boosting dev productivity, in the terms of Gatsby, I think one of the biggest productivity boosters is that it lives within the React ecosystem, which just is, it's a whole world of front-end development tooling that you have access to, any kind of component UI, state management, like all this stuff. You have the world at your fingertips when it comes to like finding the tooling that you need to boost the dev productivity. Then within the Gatsby ecosystem itself, we have things like starters and themes that let you handle a lot of the configuration just once. So anybody that's ever, raise your hand if you ever had to set up like a custom Babel or Webpack config, and after you did it, you're like, oh, thank God I don't have to do that again. And then a month later you have another project, and yes, guess what you're doing again? You're configuring all that stuff again, right? So right out of the box, Gatsby handles a lot of that JavaScript tooling stuff for you, right? The odds of you having to even touch a Webpack or Babel config are pretty low. That being said, say your agency has a certain set of tools that you like to use around your project. Say you're always using styled components, you're always using Storybook, you're always using Jest for some tests or whatever you might have. You can create a Gatsby starter or a Gatsby theme that has all of that already configured, and then it's just Gatsby new, and you point to your starter or you do the theme, and you only have to do that configuration once. Because sometimes getting those tools set up can be time consuming. So it kind of comes from a lot of different angles when it comes to productivity with not just the Jamstack, but Gatsby.
For sure. And then we're going to get into that. We have a slide for it. But coming off Jamstack, like why Gatsby? Gatsby is just a piece of the Jamstack ecosystem. We obviously feel like it's the best front-end framework for building your website for various reasons. But it is kind of this open source framework coupled with a vertically integrated cloud. So we have both the open source framework itself and plugins, which we'll talk about. Grayson just mentioned some of the starters and themes. All of that is included in our open source and free, just like a WordPress or Drupal. And then on top of that, we have Gatsby Cloud, where we have a ton of features that help you deliver and optimize your Gatsby experience and put it on an edge network that delivers just an absolutely fantastic experience for both, again, the DX side. So your agency will be able to build quickly, put advantages there, but also the UX side, where blazing fast deployment times and just served on the edge itself. So Gatsby framework, why we think we differentiate ourselves. We connect any content or data. Grayson's going to talk about this on the next slide, actually. But we have this really innovative data layer that matches everything that you could possibly want on a website and have it displayed in this third party or kind of this like decoupled data layer. Then work with modern tech and tooling, the dev productivity we just talked about. We're not working and uploading files to FTP. We're not using like older technology. We're able to use this rich ecosystem that React has kind of blossomed lately and use all the latest tools that we like. Start and finish projects faster, starters, themes, plugins. We will reiterate this for agencies. We really feel like, especially with some of the technology like in themes, that we really have a leg up and we can help you deliver projects faster. And then lastly, coupled and vertically integrated with Gatsby Cloud, we have a build and hosting solution that, again, can build incrementally within 5-15 seconds on large 10 to 50,000 sites, making that problem of end user clients and this whole CMS and Jamstack with static generation, it renders it almost null. There's very little time in between you updating your website in the CMS and Gatsby Cloud being able to build it. So first, Grayson, let's talk a little bit about that data layer and how it really helps us out.
Yeah, this is probably my favorite thing to talk about with Gatsby, because to me, it is what makes Gatsby, right? It's what makes it special. Gatsby is a static site generator, but you pick any language, any programming language, and it's going to have its static site generator. You've got like, you could do it with PHP or Ruby or whatever, and you can generate a static site. Like, that's been around for quite a while. Actually, I was very skeptical of Gatsby when I first saw Kyle Matthews tweet out about it like years ago in like the alpha or beta. I was like, why do we need a static site generator? That's like old news. Why do we, that's not exciting, right? But what's exciting and what's different is the data layer, right? So it's this idea that you can bring data from multiple sources, but when you're the developer and you're interacting with that data and your components are interacting with that data, it feels like one data source, right? So I like to imagine something like an avatar or maybe a product page or something like that, that's going to be pulling like some customer information on it that's coming from your Salesforce, right? It's going to have some product information that's coming from Shopify. It's going to have some, maybe some related blog posts or something that's trying to funnel them coming from your Contentful or your WordPress, right? Like if you're not using Gatsby, you're going to be writing fetches to 3 different APIs on every page that's using all these different datas, and then interacting with 3 different APIs that have, different conventions. Gatsby has this plugin ecosystem. And so in most cases, it's a few lines of code to install the plugin, and then you just have all the data there on whatever page, and the page doesn't care that it's actually coming from somewhere else. It all gets normalized into this GraphQL data layer. To me, that's like the most powerful thing about Gatsby, and there's so much more we have planned for leveraging that. So to me, that's my favorite. I've worked with CMSs that are, especially like this whole Jamstack thing. There are CMSs like WordPress and Drupal that were created a long time ago before the idea of headless was even a thing. So this idea of that is that they're catching up kind of in their support for a headless architecture. So a JSON API or something, a REST API is not going to be the most fun thing to interact with when you're trying to filter and sort and do these different things. And if you had to do that by hand on every page, you're like, well, I don't get this. This doesn't make sense. But Gatsby makes plugging into that so simple and easy. Yeah, hands down to me, most powerful and best feature about Gatsby.
And on the client experience side, it renders the front end, I don't want to say obsolete, that's the wrong word for it, but they don't care. You're still going to be comfortable. The client's still going to use WordPress. They're still going to use Drupal. They can still use Shopify, but they're going to get a fast, secure, performant front end that looks unified, that has no limits. Again, when you go with WordPress, you might be kind of backed into like a WooCommerce corner and want to use Shopify, and it's not the simplest integration. With Gatsby, you're just going to have kind of an endless possibilities of mixing and matching different services. Not only does you can see in the e-commerce world, but also in B2B world, where companies are buying smaller startups and mashing their website in. They're going to have documentation. They're going to have a marketing site. They're going to have an HR site with a greenhouse API. They're going to have the community support coming from Lithium. All of that, it's going to look disjoint. Well, it already looks disjointed on many B2B websites, right? And you see the flavor of their documentation. It's different from the marketing pages. All that is readily solved with Gatsby from, again, a feature standpoint, but also a look standpoint, which is great. All right, next up, the modern DX. Some of the things that just come out of the box with Gatsby, Grayson, you want to cover real quick, like that you just don't have to worry about as a developer?
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a plugin for everything, but a lot of this stuff is just out of the box. So, CSS modules and Sass, that kind of stuff is already there. You can use the latest React now. You can use React 18, the concurrent mode suspense stuff. Technically, if you wanted to turn that on, obviously GraphQL is going to already be there because Gatsby is going to be using GraphQL to fetch your data at build time. And I kind of want to touch on this a little bit, is that when I first learned Gatsby, I did not know any GraphQL. And I hear a lot of people say, well, you have to learn GraphQL to learn Gatsby. I kind of came at it from the other way. I was like, wow, I get to learn GraphQL. Like I like learning new things. I'm like, I get to learn GraphQL by using this React framework. So you start with just queries. Next thing you know, you're understanding schemas and types and mutations and interfaces, and you're learning all of GraphQL. And then your whole dev team learns GraphQL, and you've got another tool in your tool belt. And it starts just really small. You just have to learn how to query with GraphQL. That's all you need to know. Anyways, I think that's
no, it's a great point, especially for agencies for onboarding new devs and such, to feel like they don't have to have someone with GraphQL experience right off day one.
Right.
All right, we talked about a little bit of this before, but themes, plugins, starters, they're all going to help you speed the development process. Here's kind of a graphical example of themes we were talking about before of how we can reuse configurations like test harnesses, deployment modes, images, templates, all the things that Grayson was talking about before. And then this is the static like advantage. The static generated sites, they're always going to be faster. There's always a performance boost there. So we heavily want to lean towards that. We're doing some cool things. We have functions to bring in a little bit more dynamic things. We have some things on the way to help out with a little bit more dynamic functionality. But in general, we're always leaning towards static site generation, and it's a faster way to deliver websites. You no longer have the back and forth trip of each page that needs to touch the server. You're only asking the edge for the information, and it's already there. All right, so we talked about Gatsby. Next, we're going to talk about Gatsby Cloud and some of the advantages you'll see there with deploying your Gatsby site on the Gatsby Cloud. So create, collaborate, deliver, and organize. These are kind of the 4 things that we help you do better as an agency. For the creation, we have amazing integrations out of the box with a lot of the top CMSs that allow some advanced functionality we'll talk about in the collaboration section. Then collaborate, pull requests, and preview URLs. That's going to be big there to help collaboration with your agency and client. Then delivery of the actual website. We'll talk a little bit about the Edge CDN. And then just organization and management, how Gatsby Cloud is set up to help you do that in a more efficient manner. So on the creation side, we have an amazing template and starter kit that template and starters that come right out of Gatsby Cloud. It's like a 5-click interface, and you can get like a contentful blog set up right away. It's amazing. It also enables kind of that next level functionality on something like the preview URL. So with Gatsby Cloud, we have Gatsby previews that you'll be able to update a large site with kind of this staging URL, and will incrementally load your content, and you can share that around. So it'll be like, let's say, preview gatsbyjs.com, and you can share that out with a client. It's kind of the staging environment. But then we'll also have on each pull request, you'll get a custom build. So developers, Grayson just did put in a new feature. He's got it on his branch. It gets built. We're going to generate a unique URL that he's going to be able to share out to anybody on the team, share with his VP. She can check it out and read, make sure that it's okay, and then deploy it. But we're getting kind of atomic looks at each piece of change on the code side. And then again, on the CMS side, anytime your client makes an update to their CMS, we're not going to get a full build with a preview. So kind of the downfall of static in the past has been the long, lengthy full rebuild. We're going to get an incremental build that is literally magical. For the Gatsby site today, we have over 10,000 pages consistently. Usually we'll get an update within 5 to 7 seconds. So it's pretty negligible. It's near real time, but it really helps with collaborating over the static site. I know it's a tough sell sometimes when you go in with a client that's used to server side like WordPress installation, where they're just clicking preview. They're going to that page and they're seeing what they just did. Describing that somebody may have to wait 3-4 minutes is really tough. This kind of knocks that out, and Gatsby Cloud previews makes that a lot easier. Delivery on the cloud, we have amazing built-in features like free SSL, global points of presence. Just again, with the cloud CDN, or with CDN, you're going to get a much more scalable system. Everything is HTTPS 2 locked down out of the gate, so you're not going to have to make that choice. And we are built on top of Fastly. So Gatsby Cloud, you're going to get the speed and security of one of the largest and most well-known CDNs on the planet. And then organize. We have what's called workspaces inside Gatsby Cloud to help you organize your clients' websites. Within each workspace, you can add different domains, different properties that they might have, but they're able to organize all of that in one space, have billing attached to it, and not see anything that you might not want them to see in another client. So workspaces are a great way to go about creating little silos for your end customers. All right, so that is our kind of slides we have today. Grayson, we have a couple questions, and I think just we'll talk a little bit more, and we'll see if anybody has anything live. All right, so first question is about best practices of collaborative scenarios with preview URLs, and whatever else this might incorporate. So this is a great question. It's something, again, that is new. It's something that, like previously with SSR, you actually didn't need, because kind of the preview was just solved. You had these staging URLs that might have solved like draft content, but Gatsby Cloud previews is really going to help solve the flow. So today we use it. We're heavy users of it, obviously, ourselves. GatsbyJS.com is built with Gatsby and Contentful. So Contentful has the out-of-the-box integration with Gatsby Cloud. So when we're in our Contentful instance, there's going to be a preview button right below publish. It looks a lot like WordPress, and it's going to pull drafted content. So when you write in Contentful, when you write in these headless CMSs, there's a state of draft, which is auto-saved, and then there's kind of the state of published. Our preview URL is going to default to the draft content. So as soon as you make a change to something and it auto-saves, we're going to incrementally build that on the preview URL, and that will appear. So then you can share that URL out. The URL or the preview UI is now updated. So you'll see a little bar on the left-hand side with a bit of information where you can share the link. You can also see where the preview build is. So let's say the build fails for some reason, that's actually going to show now on the preview URL. It's going to be available, and it's not like this black box for the client, but we're adding a lot more functionality as well. We'll be excited to share a lot more news over the next coming weeks about that. But right now, the preview UI is the best URL to share. The other thing is the atomic URL part on the build side. That currently doesn't have the UI where you're able to share or where you're able to see the build status. It's just going to be that one singular build itself, and you can share that out. And then as you build again, you're going to get a new URL. We think the preview URI or the preview UI is best shared between client and agency. We probably think that the atomic URLs in the build is better for just working within like your agency collaboration itself. Though if you have new features that you'd like to show off, that's why they're there. It's easy to do. You just have to know that it's, again, going to be a very atomic build. It's not going to get any updates that you do after. So just remember to remind the client. We are going to add more functionality around kind of RBAC and around the preview URL. So you can think about if it would be helpful for every content creator to have their own, right? These are some things we're exploring right now. So if you do have those needs, let us know, drop it in the chat, drop it in the QA. But those are something we're thinking about. It's just like multiple kind of staging URLs that you could update your preview to. Does the autosave behavior have the effect of making previews seem faster to the editor? It actually does. It has the secondary effect of working in the background. So as I'm writing content out, and let's say I spend 10 minutes on writing content, I don't even look at the page. It's going to be building constantly in the background that whole time, actually. So if I then go to look, I'll only be basically 10 seconds behind my latest edit. So the last 9 minutes and 45 seconds of constantly updating will have been building in the background. We'll have been updating to that preview URL. So to the end client, it's going to feel near instantaneous. It's basically like watching a slow load, if you will, but it'll be right there. Again, we scale, we have over 10,000 pages. Commonly, I update content every day on the website. It's literally never takes longer than 15 seconds for that content preview, which is amazing. Another question, my client doesn't update his websites often, but when he does, he needs to wake up the Gatsby preview. Can it be automatic when a webhook calls the preview? Grayson, do you know today the limit on the preview server and how long it spins down?
Yeah, so it depends on your tier. I think the lowest is maybe 8 hours before it kind of goes to sleep for and has to be awakened. But if you have the newest version of preview, then that webhook will wake up the server on its own. So you don't have to go in and wake it up on your own. The webhook should do that. So if it's not happening, then we can have a look and make sure you're on the latest preview version. Dan kind of mentioned the incremental preview, and so basically, and I want to kind of explain this because I know y'all are good users here. That idea of an incremental preview was a under the hood, behind the scenes change that we made to make it faster and more stable. But we didn't change the name. There was no big release because it's really a kind of just an infrastructure update on our end, and it shouldn't have to change the way that you use preview. If anything, it should just make it feel more seamless, like this webhook idea. There are, however, I think there's 1 or 2 CMSs left that are not fully compatible with that version of preview. So maybe you're using one of those CMSs. But if you're having that issue, if the webhook is not waking it up, then you can file a support ticket and we can have a look. And it could be that you're on one of those CMSs, but those last.
Yeah, and actually Ryan just dropped in that he's on Sanity, which I believe is one of those CMSs.
Yeah, and Ahmed says Sanity as well. Yeah, so Sanity is like one of the last ones that does not fully support it. So,
and it's not because of popularity. It's
right.
It's because of the way they do things is a little bit differently than the rest.
Right. I don't know if it's a web socket that they're using, or if it has to reach into Sanity's internal APIs when there's a data update. It's something like that. But I'd highly recommend, these source plugins. Yes, we help manage a lot of them, but they're also open source. So if a lot of times our users like you are more experts with an individual CMS and its API than some of us are. So I know with Drupal, I've talked with people and they, can look at the source plugin and they know the real internals of how Drupal works and they come up with these amazing ideas. So, Sanity is the same idea. Like some of you are Sanity power users and you could look at the source plugin and be like, okay, I see a way to change the way this is happening. And that's all open source. So definitely encourage people to contribute there.
All right, that makes a ton of sense. Also, I would say feel free to reach out to us directly. We would love to. We're continuing to obviously talk to agencies more and more as we go through our motions, and we love to hear from you about either the plugin troubles or on the end side of your clients, how we could help you better serve. We're adding some more functionality to workspaces around like billing and RBAC. So that's one of the ways that we've been asked in the past about how we can seamlessly maybe hand off projects. So that's something we're actually actively addressing right now. But feel free to reach out to us and work with us there.
So I do have a quick, I think this is a hacky workaround people have used for Sanity.
Here we go, some inside knowledge. Let's do it.
I believe that that Sanity lets you just like have some JavaScript that runs when you log into Sanity or when you get to the Sanity dashboard. And so what you can do is have that hook into that custom JavaScript and just hit the webhook whenever someone logs in to Sanity. Or have it set on a timer where every day it hits the webhook and just make sure that the preview is up and awake for that day. I believe Sanity is one of the CMSs that lets you run custom JavaScript like within the Sanity Studio or the Sanity dashboard, whatever it is.
Okay, that's awesome. All right, Martin has a question about safely hosting websites from an EU country via Gatsby Cloud. Are there any problems with GDPR? Off the bat, I would say no, just because again, the general nature of the actual static site, you're not hosting any client data. on like the server. It's statically being served at the edge. So I'd say no. But there's obviously, if you have a client in the EU that may not be able to hold that, that could be something that we might need to address in the future. All right, we have a couple questions. That was awesome. Grayson, thank you for joining us today. It was great to have somebody, I think, with firsthand experience. Any last words you want to say to your agency brethren?
Nope. Just we're here to help you. And if you've got ideas of what we can do better, let us know. I will say I feel like the pace and the cadence of Gatsby the last year or so has really picked up and solidified in a lot of ways. And if you think it's been good so far, the stuff we have on the roadmap for the rest of this year will probably blow your mind a little bit. So stay tuned. And thanks for supporting us, and we want to do the same for you.
Yeah, and if you're not already, head over to gatsbyjs.com/partners. Sign up to be part of our partner program. We have some new sales enablement, some new agency toolkits coming out that we'll be able to supply you with, again, just a little bit of collateral to help you sell to clients better and hopefully make more revenue. All right, thank you. And we have one poll that we're going to launch.
We've got one more question.
Yeah, let's answer it.
I'm
going to launch this poll.
You might know this, because I don't know if we have ads, but it says I have a lot of clients whose sites use aggregated ad networks. Aside from media via, each seems to have a hard time with static site generators. Is there an ad network that is modern enough for static site generators?
Off the top of my head, I don't have one. I do know though that one of the things that really helped with Gatsby is using the route change out of the box and use the Gatsby route change function to really help some of the analytics and ad tools reload on each route change. So sometimes they see Gatsby as kind of the static, like single page application. And it'll have a tough time following it around. For instance, like Marketo, if a client has Marketo, oftentimes it won't follow each page click. But if you fire the actual cookie or the snippet on the route change function, that really helps out with having a much more accurate, like analytical perspective of the website itself. So you'll be tracking each change, each page load, or each page change. We'll get a reload of that snippet and we'll get the new information from the DOM. Whereas if you don't use that, some snippets really struggle. Like I'll throw out Marketo, it is big in our world. We use it. If you're not using the route change and you just use like the page load, you're going to miss every subsequent step after the user lands on the first page. So use that route change function. It should help get you a little bit more accurate there.
And I'd also encourage everyone, these kind of questions are awesome, where they're kind of like best practice or, you know, real in the wild type stuff that you come across, more like web agency questions. So we have a Discord channel as well that anyone can join. And also we have a pretty active GitHub discussions tab. So we definitely handle issues in the issues queue, but there are discussions, you know, constantly going on in the discussions tab on GitHub. So Discord is a great place for something like I think that question. And then hopefully somebody that is, you know, really happy with their ad system that they're using with Gatsby can give you some kind of more hands-on feedback than we could.
For sure. All right, thank you all for the poll. I'll give you a quick insight into it. 82% mentioned speed and user experience as the biggest challenge they have. Integrations and cost savings were up next, but obviously speed is clearly the #1 challenge. All right, all, thank you again for showing up. And Grayson, we appreciate it as well.